Hello, everybody. This is Paul Neeson with Torah Life Ministries, and I have a topic today that I want to discuss that is very controversial and is becoming more controversial because the government is getting involved. And the topic is marijuana. Specifically, what is my viewpoint as a believer of the Most High, a wonderful Creator, Yahweh, from a standpoint of cannabis oil, using marijuana medicinally, or using it recreationally. And these are the topics that I'm going to present in today's video. And it's two interviews I'm going to be presenting today. One of them is with a fellow who recently contacted me wanting to know my opinion about CBD oil or cannabis oil as a believer. And that's what he wanted to know. Well, we conducted, I wouldn't necessarily call it debate, even though we both disagreed on it and gave our viewpoints. But our discussion, our conversation, we covered all these different topics, and that's what we'll see. Then I'm going to show another interview with a fellow who I interviewed several years ago, who had been smoking marijuana for many, many years since his childhood, and his feedback on marijuana and the scriptures and his take on it. So these are two of the topics. Now, before I go and show you these interviews, I do want to say that I understand everyone is entitled to their own opinion and their own ideas. Some of the things that I claim or the people I interview claimed you might not be in agreement with, whether it's scripturally or whether it's just a way of an opinion of the way we want to live our lives. And that's all good and fine. You know, I'm not trying to say that I know it all about this topic, and I don't. That's why I actually interview people that have a lot more experience with it than I do. But I do know what the scriptures say about certain things, and I'm going to present my side of these different things and use scripture to back it up. So I also want to say that I have such wonderful, close people to my life that are friends of mine that disagree with me on this topic. That's not going to make me not be their friend, but also at the same hand, it's going to make me pray for them even more to see not what I would consider my point of view on this, but what I think is the Bible point of view on this. So if anyone is watching that knows me personally, that you do disagree with me or disagree with me on this issue, or you see it different than I do, this is not a personal attack on you. This had nothing to do with you, or the video had nothing to do with making this and with you, any of you in mind. This was this fellow contacting me, or both these fellows actually contacting me, and wanted to speak about the topic and asking me my opinion of it. And this is why I want to put this information out to respond to them. And also, I really do feel that it needs to be discussed more because there is a lot of confusion about this topic, especially from a biblical standpoint. And I want to let people know the possible dangers of partaking in certain substances. So I felt, you know, even if these fellows didn't contact me to speak about them, it's just a matter of time. I would have made a full teaching on it. So, but it's out of my love for my friends and everyone that I want this viewpoint to come out about it. So please sit back and watch these, comment on them, and let me know what you think. And here it goes.
Why are you against marijuana or the therapeutic use of it for people in general and specifically for the church?
Well, I strongly believe in the medicinal effects of herbs. From a biblical stance, obviously, our Creator gave us herbs as our medicine. And just from being in the health field for many years, I know that people have been helped by the use of the marijuana plant. I don't think it's good for people to take or use on a recreational basis. I think it's against Scripture to use on a recreational basis because the Bible says we should be of our own mind. And when we take that, whether people want to say they're having some type of spiritual experience or not, I think it's an open door to the enemy to come in because you're not of your own mind and you can't make wise decisions. I definitely think marijuana, the use of it, is definitely better than the toxic, addictive drugs that they're using in hospitals today and are getting people hooked on. So if it was between one or the other, and people had to make a choice between one or the other, I would say the marijuana is the safer choice, or at least the less harmful choice. But I still think it's used more often than people think it should be used. People make an excuse to use it, and they feel because the government says it's okay now that they think it's okay. I think it sets a really bad example for children, legalizing of marijuana from that standpoint. From the standpoint of a biblical text, again, it's some people said it was used during temple times, and it was one of the incense that was being burned.
No, not just that, but it's kene bosim, which is the fifth element and the oil of the tabernacle, Exodus 30,
that's referring
was mistranslated into calamus, which is a type of reed that doesn't do any good. You know, kene bosim ended up as being cannabis, and it ended up as being cannabis.
I know about that. I'm in agreement with that, and I certainly don't think they smoked it and got high. As for medicinally, I know people with cancer that did true marijuana oil that you get on the black market versus the stuff they're selling out there today, which is I don't feel good about that at all. I think it's it's too mass spread, and it's such a watered down version because it's becoming a marketed item and not the black market. So you got the advantage and the disadvantage of the you lose quality, I guess is what I'm saying when you just and every company claims theirs is the best, and you don't know whose is the best and whose isn't.
Mm-hmm.
I have no doubt that the pure marijuana oil that people have been using on the black market is helpful for some cancers, and I have no doubt as a painkiller for people doing some cancer therapies and people with cancer, it definitely is better than what they're giving. But overall, I'm not in favor of it. Just the idea of it, I think it sends a really bad message that it's becoming so commonly used today, and society is just a great example of that. People are using it as a common drug, and years ago they used to use cocaine as a toothache, as a thing for toothaches. They used to give little kids cocaine and all these little things, and you know, whether it be they wanted to tax it or make more money off it, that they made it. Prescription drugs legalized or illegal or legal, whatever it is.
Have you ever used it? Have you ever smoked a joint or taken some oil or whatever?
I haven't. I have not taken the oil, and I have not smoked.
Okay. Why do you think getting high is a bad thing? Why do you think? I mean, the Bible isn't very specific about it. Alcohol, which is a far more damaging drug, is acceptable within the Bible, obviously within limits, without drunkenness, etc. So getting high, getting outside of your mind a little bit, at least with alcohol, is condoned, even suggested by Paul to was it Timothy to ease his many illnesses. What's wrong with why can't marijuana be the same thing?
It's a very good point you bring up. I'm not of any particular sect of a religion, but I take the Baptist approach when it comes to alcohol. I don't think it's acceptable in the Bible, and I think there are verses to show that the alcohol, the wine that was used, it certainly wasn't fermented the way it is today, and to the degree it is today. But the Baptist approach to, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but they don't believe in the use of alcohol, and they, like everyone has their scriptures to defend their point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of people find that as a far stretch. So I don't like when people say alcohol's okay, but marijuana's not, because I agree with you completely. You can't condone one and not the other from a scriptural standpoint. You either agree with both or you don't. But to say it's okay to drink wine to make you feel a little okay, but it's not okay to smoke, I think
it's a little hypocritical.
I think it's very hypocritical. But so for me, I'm a no on both of those, and I think it's because simply, He created us wonderfully and amazing, and He wants us to be of our own mind. He doesn't want us to uh, lose focus of things. He wants us to be of our own mind. And the drug, I'm sure 100% that's what it does. Just like alcohol, it has a different effect maybe on a chemical basis, but I wouldn't trust people's judgment.
Do you think the Bible prohibits it? Are you categorical
No,
in the
no, I
prohibition of
see.
it?
See, there are things like, for example, I'm a health teacher, and there are things like, I think everything has its reason. Like, for example, I'm against coffee uh, as an everyday drink.
Okay.
But obviously, a creator created the coffee bean for a reason. Even garlic, I believe, on a daily basis is abusing one of his herbs. So his herbs are there for medicine, they're there for a reason. And I think if they're used the right way and in the right situation, they can be beneficial. But the problem really is, I guess, is people are uh, mistreating it, I would say. So I do think he created for a reason, and he didn't make any mistakes. I think people are just like they do with everything. They're taking what our creator gave us and just making a bad thing out of a good thing.
Well, I told you I disagree with you.
Yep.
I am a serious human being. I am a good, godly human being. I'm not involved in a church, but I am a believer. I am saved. I pray, and I just cannot adapt myself to any church situation. I think God is bigger than any church. If it helps you spiritually, great. It doesn't help me. I was very, very involved in the church, and I smoke. I smoke pot. When I smoke, it gives me. It doesn't take me out of my mind. It actually allows me to focus and allows me even spiritually to feel creation a lot better. And I don't become, the old archetypes of potheads in the sofa eating chips and watching TV. That's an archetype that is silly and unnecessary, and that was put out to the world.
Sure.
I know I have a lot of friends who smoke, a lot of people who are important religious leaders, Christian leaders who smoke, and who use it as a therapy. So I don't agree. I feel that I have found freedom, and I am not I'm not bound to what I need to take or I'm prohibited to take. Everything is allowed. Not everything is wise, so it takes wisdom to know what my limits. I don't drink alcohol, for example. Alcohol doesn't do me well. I find that alcohol.
What would you say to somebody that does alcohol and it says it does them well, and everything you're saying about marijuana, they say alcohol gives me freedom, it makes me feel.
That's fine. I don't drink alcohol not because I think it's a bad thing. Obviously, it can be.
Yeah.
If you take it past a certain point, obviously, and I know a lot of people who have battled with alcoholism and who become violent and all that, then it's an evil like anything else.
Do you think marijuana can be taken past a certain point?
Yeah. Yes, I do. I mean, I think anything can be taken past a certain point. Food, water.
Let me ask you this. So I'm in agreement with you about the church and the whole system of Christianity, just like the system of Judaism. They're all man-made systems. They're not of Scripture. They're not of the Bible. And this is why I don't partake in that. But your children, you have a son. So when your son was younger, I mean, first, when did you first start smoking? Did you grow up smoking marijuana?
No, I didn't grow up smoking. I grew up in a very strict Presbyterian household. I smoked my first joint when I was 35.
Okay.
And for me, it was such a liberating experience to find that there was something that opened my eyes. What's interesting, I think, Paul, is that what the THC does, right? It takes away the chemicals. It unblocks the communication between neurons. So information flows a lot easier between the neurons. In the world that we're living in, we are bombarded by so many chemicals, so much information, so much, this over information. I mean, think of Paul walking down somewhere in Damascus or something. The silence, it was silent all the time. They must have spoken very little. They met few people. And now we're just bombarded by lights, by sound, by commerce, by everything, to a point that our neurons begin creating more and more blocks. Otherwise, it's filters. We have to filter all this crap that's being thrown at us. Otherwise, we couldn't survive, And it seems like each generation, they filter more. They can take more video games, with a lot of things.
Continue to get farther away. I understand that concept.
And I think what pot does is it actually brings you back to a point where your brain can function more normally, as I think people in the past did.
So 2 questions, Robin. I'm enjoying the conversation, and I hope you are too. So let me give you 2 questions. The first one is, if you had if your son was 5 years old, or 6 or 7 years old, would you have any issue with him smoking it?
Yes, I would. Yes, I would. But first, because smoking it is, when you smoke it, you take in nicotine. There is nicotine. There's tar in it, which is not good. Above all, I think a child should not be even exposed to it or know about it, mostly because of social pressure, mostly because of the stigma that's associated with it.
Are you there? Oh, you stopped for a second.
Okay, can you hear me?
Hey, I heard you say for the social pressure they shouldn't be exposed.
And the stigma that is with it. I mean, if a child knows, I wouldn't tell my son when he was 5, they say, "Oh, Daddy smokes a joint." Because he would tell his friends, and his friends would tell their parents.
Well, let's take it this way: as it becomes more legalized, if more children started doing it, maybe not 5, maybe 10, 11 years old, would you have a problem giving it?
Yes, to 10. I think that everything has a certain age. There's an evolution in your body and in your mind that you are allowed. I think a child doesn't need it unless it's for therapeutic reasons. There are kids who have seizures who are being treated with cannabis.
Sure, but if it's doing what you're saying it does, if anyone could benefit from it, it would be children. I mean, if you're doing, about the just relaxing you and not even from a therapeutic standpoint, just a standpoint of just expressing yourself more or helping your mind.
But I don't think children have the same filters that we do. I don't think children are there are obviously. There are certain limitations as your age progresses. There is a maturity that comes along that you don't expose children. Children are not ready for. It's not just drugs or just marijuana or just alcohol. It's everything. What's on TV? Violence.
But then you're a Bible person, so in the Bible, like women were getting married once they reached puberty, on average. That was the average girl was married at 13, 14 years old. So today, we've expanded that age so much to say, you got to be 21 to get married or whatever it is. But back then, it was such a young age, and it was accepted as normal back then. So when you're talking about this maturity with the drugs, I mean, are you basing that on maybe the standards of today? Because if somebody's ready to get married, they'd be ready to handle something like that, would you think?
I think back then, people lived to very. We're talking about from biblical times to the Middle Ages. People died at 30, 35. So they were.
I don't know. I mean, people having babies at 90 years old.
Well, I mean, we're talking 90 years old. We're talking on Abrahamic times. Old Testament times. Yeah. Age mortality reduced incredibly as time went by, and it's increasing again only in the last couple of 100 years. So I think a 15-year-old was middle-aged, in the dark.
I got you. Here's my other question, and this is the most important question that I would present to you and everyone else. When you mention marijuana, what it does for you, the benefits it gives you, how it helps you relax, but also helps you expand your mind and all these things. As a Christian or as a believer, whatever you want to title yourself, I know you believe in Jesus, I call him Yeshua. Isn't that what his role is? Or the Holy Spirit's role is? And not the marijuana, but the Holy Spirit's supposed to give you every benefit you're mentioning that you get from the marijuana? Isn't that what the Holy Spirit should be doing?
No, not only. The Holy Spirit, Yeshua, we still have to eat food. We still have to drink water. We live in a system, in a world where everything is in him and he is in everything. And we are part of the universe. And we're part of nature, and nature is a part of us. I mean, it is all, for me, everything. I'm not a pantheist, but I do believe that we are in Christ, as Christ is in the Father, and he is within us, and it's all one. And it's so much more complex than we could ever try to fit into any system. So for me, in actual fact, religions are all silly, because silly, but sometimes useful and necessary for people to whom they bring goodness. But
Sure.
they don't reach, not even close to what God is. We cannot. We're limited. We're finite. We're temporary. We're tiny. So we have a very tiny, limited, temporary understanding of God and eternity. So we're just a tiny little part of it, and to presume that we know the truth, to presume that we know what people should do and shouldn't do and have to do, etc., 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 is a little condescending and a little prideful, I think.
What about? I mean, I'm agreeing with you. These man-made systems are not biblical, like we say. But what about other drugs? And we know the law is the government, and they make them legally illegal. But in general, I mean, I know the other drugs are processed; they're not like a natural form that you're just not growing. But we still have the ability to make them.
Yeah.
Like cocoa plant, you can make cocaine.
Yes.
And these other drugs, and what about these drugs? What's your opinion?
They have their place. They have their place, but as potency increases, their limits are very tiny. I mean, usually they're medical. They're medical purposes, right? I mean, if it wasn't for what's the one that everybody gets hooked on now? The painkillers. No, the painkillers.
Oh, yeah, the morphine.
Yeah, the morphines. If it wasn't for morphines,
opiates.
The opiates.
Yeah.
If it wasn't from opiates, we couldn't have operations. We couldn't dull pain. So that's their purpose. I personally, I think criminalization of drugs is not a good policy. It goes against the Constitution, and I think human beings should be able to ingest whatever they want. If they want to take rat poison, it's their precedent. But I'm not defending drugs at all. I'm quite on the contrary. What we have to do is tell people, is teach people that exactly what the Bible says, that everything is permissible, but not everything is licit. Not everything is wise.
What it really says, or the meaning is, it doesn't mean everything. So he's giving us guidelines and instructions of what's an abomination. So that's like I've had this argument with homosexuals, mm-hmm. and they'll say everything is permissible. Just pray over everything. Everything's good. And you can't eat a pork sandwich and pray over it and think that God's going to ordain it. He called it an abomination. And even if somebody believes that, well, that law was nailed to the cross, he's still called an abomination, and it's not everything's good. I mean, there are some things that he simply calls an abomination.
I think I live under a new law. I don't live in the same law that the Jews lived in under the Torah and the prophets and the Mishnahs.
What? You're a Bible guy, right?
Yes, I am. I have.
What Bible verse? So what Bible? Give me one Bible verse that says we don't need to follow the Ten Commandments.
We are. Christ has fulfilled all the commandments. I don't want this to get into a religious Old Testament, New Testament thing. Otherwise,
what it comes down to is for me the question is, and we agree to disagree, but for me the question is, what is sin, right? And sin is transgression of the law, as it says in the New Testament. But we don't have to get into this debate about the Bible now. But if you think smoking pot is okay for you, that's good for you. If you think it's okay biblically, I would strongly disagree that I can't imagine, at least from my understanding, that Yeshua and his disciples were hanging out smoking pot, and especially the reasoning behind it. Well, they didn't have a lot of people. I'm not saying this is the only reason, but they didn't have a lot of people to talk to, and technology wasn't as busy as it is today, so they needed something to keep them busy. So they decided to.
No, that's not what I said. I said quite the opposite. I said that we have so much technology that our minds are dulled. We have so many filters to deal with this that smoking pot actually frees us a little bit, and it's not very much. Medically, it's not a dangerous drug. You can't get addicted to it. You can't overdose.
See, medically, I would. About overdosing, possibly agree with you. I don't know much about that, but I do know you can get addicted to it because I do know people that are addicted to marijuana. I definitely do. Maybe it's the feeling, maybe it's something, but I know people that I could say, well, stop doing it, and they can't.
Well, it's if you get that person and you put him in a safe room and you lock him up, he is not going to get shivers like someone who is an alcoholic or someone who does heroin.
An alcoholic will die, but it's easy to get somebody off crack than it is alcohol. But when you look at an addiction, I guess it's what you define into an addiction. But
yeah, I mean, an addiction. It's much more of a psychological addiction. I'm talking about a physiological addiction to it. If you lock a pothead in a room and he doesn't have pot, he really wants to smoke it, but it's not going to throw his system out of whack.
So let me ask you this, Robin. If you were getting on a plane, right?
Yeah.
Let's say you had enough money to have your own plane, and let's say you're getting on a plane, and you turn around and there's a new captain driving that day.
He's smoking
in the driving seat, smoking a joint. Are you going to feel comfortable on that
flight?
Not
at all. Not at all. No, I don't drive when I smoke pot.
So you would agree that it does. I'm not saying in a negative way, but it definitely messes with your judgment.
Oh, of course it does. Yeah, it does. It does alter your judgment. So there's certain things that you can't do. I mean, if you take cough medicine, you're not supposed to operate.
I'm glad you say you don't drive with that. That's a big problem I have because there's a lot of people I know today that smoke and they don't see any issue with driving, and they don't just smoke. We're talking about also ingesting it orally or vaporizing it or whatever you want to say. But then they go and drive, and I think this is not a good thing.
No, it's not a good thing. No, I agree. But that's got nothing to do with the bigger issue that we're discussing here.
Yeah. I think so. I guess my outcome would be is, for me, I would like to rely on Yeshua. To feel a certain way and not take something to alter my mood that's not what I feel, not only not of him, but at least not, it's extra, it's something beyond him. And it's almost, and don't get offended by this, but it's almost making an idol of something because, it's like saying, or what I hear, and I'm not saying I'm right, I'm humble enough to say I could be wrong. I was I'm humble enough to say it, but to say I'm getting too nervous, or I'm getting too excited, or I'm getting too, and I'm not saying you do this, but I know people. I need to go smoke a joint. I need to relax. I need to calm down, versus saying I need to go pray.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and something like this. Now, I have had people come to my fellowship, or a fellowship I went to in the past, and they said they have to drink beer because they can't be stirred up to even have a conversation because they're quiet intellectuals, and they can't even have a conversation unless they have a little buzz, and then they could really talk. I found that ludicrous, but I find this being the same kind of attitude of people that smoke marijuana. And maybe it's just the people that I know who smoke it, but I don't think it's biblical at all.
Okay. You are a lot more level-headed and a conversation than I expected you to be. I thought you were going to be a lot more radical and just call it a sin and not even consider it.
No, not at all. I think it's especially considering you understand biblical the Bible. So it's yeah. I think again we could agree to disagree. You know, I would. I didn't grow up around drugs either. You know, everybody I know who smokes it. I mean, I was interested to hear that you didn't smoke till you were 35, because everybody I know who smokes, it's not something they picked up later in life. It's something they picked up early in life.
Earlier. Yeah.
And they've done for a long time. And then for them to get into the Bible, and now they have a reason to justify what they're doing or something else. Your experience is a little different than I've heard in the past. And you know, I'm glad you think it's biblically okay, because some people think it's not, and they still do it, and that's definitely an issue.
I'm totally at peace. I'm totally at peace, and I think it's one of God's blessings.
Yeah. Now, what about, and it's not really a case against it, but what about the legal aspect of it? Even though it's becoming law everywhere that it's allowed, but what about, you live here in Florida, and other than medicinally, it's still against the law to have it and grow it in here. So, what do you think about that?
I think that was a plot of the dark forces to block a drug or a therapy that is probably one of mankind's great resources. I think it was if you want to put it, the devil that actually wanted marijuana blocked, because it was almost a consecrated and blessing. That's how I see it. It's diametrically opposed to you. You see it as a bad, prohibited thing. I see it actually as a blessing, which was prohibited probably because it's such a blessing. And I think the world is going to see there's a lot being studied, and I think that people are going to realize, especially within the church, that Kanei Bosim was indeed a very special plant that was used to anoint the kings and the prophets, and that when Moses went saw the burning bush, that's the revelation that was given to him, that this plant has a special quality and is for our good. That's how I see it.
Sure. I've interviewed people about this. I have some good friends that some take your point of view on it, and I have other friends that used to be into it heavily, and they became a believer and actually got out of it. I guess everyone's going to have their own opinions of it, and I would pray that people would follow their own convictions and not be persuaded by man's words. And your experience speaks for itself of what you're doing. So I mean, I can't say anything. I say there's a lot worse we could be doing, according to Scripture. So it's what's your goal with it? Is your goal, I mean, not for you to just take it with the interview and filmmaking in general, is part of your goal?
I'm doing a research into the use of CBD, and how that's changing, worldwide. A lot of churches are not condemning it anymore; they're accepting it, and now that it's becoming more and more legalized, and the world is finally, coming to its senses and seeing that, man, we should not have made illegal something that can have so much benefit. My wife, she had 3 years ago, I think, she had double hip replacement, right? And she's a beautiful woman, and she was very active, works out a lot, but her hips gave out. So she had to do prosthesis, the head, the metal thing and all that. And since she did it, she kept going through inflammations and inflammations. The nerve was rubbing against the prosthesis and getting inflamed. And until recently, she was suffering all the time with it, having to take anti-inflammatories and drugs that really screwed her system up. She started using, under the direction of some friends, she started using CBD oil. And miraculously, her hips are great now. She doesn't feel a thing. We've just come back from a holiday in Paris where we walked for miles every day. She could never have done that before. And now she is walking again. She says it's like a miracle. I'm not feeling anything. And I was actually a little skeptical about that a while ago. I mean, I was all for smoking a joint for the effects it has, but the therapeutic side of it, I was a little skeptical. And now I'm becoming more and more a believer that this is a God-given drug.
Well, do you agree with what I was saying about the marijuana oil in general? The way it's packaged today, it's getting watered down, and the more it's marketed, the more it's going to continue to be the companies claiming theirs the best. It just becomes, it's not ever going to be as pure as it would be on the black market.
Actually, it's becoming stronger. They're making more and more strains, right? That it becomes stronger and stronger. What it does is that you have to take less than you had before. I mean, a cannabis plant, once cannabis was one of the largest plantations in the planet because of hemp, because of rope, and all kinds of
President George Washington grew it, actually.
I know, and you make rope, you make cloth out of it, etc. And the potency of that is very weak. Now, if you smoked rolled up a bud from that, you wouldn't get anything. And now with new potencies, it's becoming stronger. It's actually not watering down; it's actually becoming stronger. But yes, I mean, like everything else, we ingest very little that's still original. It's mostly changed and genetically changed. It'd be interesting to see how it would be, the original plant would be. But that doesn't negate our conversation. It's okay for you to say, oh, I don't have rice because rice has been so genetically modified that I won't eat it anymore. That's one thing. But to say that all rice is bad is another thing. And that's the point that we're talking. I'm talking more than you. This was supposed to be an interview with you, man, not me. I'm talking much more than you are.
I was just going to ask you too. How often do you, out of curiosity, how often do you smoke it?
Last time I smoked was over the weekends. Usually on the weekends I smoke.
All right, so you're not doing it like wake and bake and anything.
Oh
like
no,
that.
no. I'm a creator. When I it helps me to create. So I'm an artist. I'm a musician. In my films, have a look at my website at some point if you like.
Yeah, text me and I'll look at it. I agree with you about the criminalization of it. Is just ridiculous what's happened, and the stereo profiling behind it as well. So yeah, I mean, if that's interesting that you don't. Well, I mean, what's the most you've ever partaken in it? Like, have you ever felt addicted where you had to do it every day, or you just couldn't get through?
No. I mean, I've just got back from France. We spent 2 weeks there. Didn't smoke. Like I can stop immediately and not smoke. I smoke it because I want.
That was my other question: smoking versus vaporizing versus eating it.
I don't like eating it personally because you don't control how much you take. and the effects come a lot later. You know, you could take a brownie or something, and you get stoned 3 hours later. It hits you. You know, and I don't like that. I prefer smoking because then I get a little stoned and I know it's going to last me for 2 hours. After
What
2
about
hours,
vaporizing?
that's the same as smoking. Basically, the same as smoking. There's
Is it
difference
less? You think it's less harmful because it doesn't have
because it doesn't have
the
smoke. Yeah, it doesn't have the smoke associated with it. So, but you know, people that vape, there is a harm associated with that. That just the vapor going into your lungs. The damage from it is not to do with the drug itself. Is the carrier of it, I think.
And what about the reports of the sperm being lessened when people smoke too much marijuana?
I didn't know about that, and I don't have a problem because I had a vasectomy after my first kid.
Oh, you don't,
So,
but I mean, if we're promoting it and young kids can't get their wives pregnant and their sperm count is less, I'm just saying.
well, that's probably true with a lot of other things as well, isn't it?
Sure, I mean, but we're not talking about other things right now.
Yeah,
So I'm
not
saying
drugs,
that-
not drugs themselves. I mean,
Sure,
you know,
sure.
all kinds of
Absolutely.
stuff. I mean, if you want to have a kid, you should probably have a special diet. You know, I don't know how that goes.
I'm in all favor of that. That's
Yeah.
I teach about health and diet, and again, there are studies out. I mean, since I was growing up, I've heard about the studies that it definitely affects fertility. Everybody, that was the first interview / debate / discussion with the fellow that contacted me recently, asked me about the use of cannabis oil in the Bible, and as you can see, we went into several different topics there, and so on. Well, this next interview is an interview I conducted several years ago and posted it on my website, and it had a lot to do with the conversation that me and this fellow had today, so I figured I would put this interview here as well because it answered a lot of the questions that we were discussing, and it also brought up even more viewpoints on this topic, and I wanted to cover as much of it as possible. So here is an interview now with this fellow who has had a lot of personal experience with the use of marijuana and has his own opinion about what it means to use marijuana and also look at it from a scriptural standpoint. So here goes that interview. Ron, I wanted to have you on because I recently interviewed somebody about marijuana in the Bible. Is it okay? And there was a lot of positive and negative comments about the interview and about marijuana in general. But I wanted to get your experience because you had some good feedback, and I always like to get somebody who has personal experience with these things. So can you tell us a little bit about, first, when you saw the video, and then I'll put a link to the video on the screen, everybody, so you can go see it later. But when you saw the video of it's what seemed like us supporting marijuana from a scriptural standpoint, you shared a little bit of your experience, and then you disagreed that it's a positive thing, marijuana. So can you tell us about your comment and also your experience with it?
Well, sir, I grew up in a Christian background, going to church, and when I was about 14 years old, I started getting heavy into smoking marijuana. And by the time I was 15, I was arrested with conspiracy to distribute a quarter pound of marijuana. So it escalated rather quickly. And by the time I got older and I had realized just exactly what the things I have done was wrong, and I had got into many, many, many bad things with that being a gateway drug, and I just needed to find a way to come back to God, and thank the Lord He led me back to Him.
Now, when you call it a gateway drug, I mean, I know a lot of people that smoke marijuana, but they, by no means do they ever dabble or have a temptation to dabble in other drugs. So do you think it's a gateway drug for just some people, or do you think eventually for everyone it is?
I don't believe it is for everybody, but I do believe that once you're into that culture and that life, it is absolutely more accessible to you. You have people offer you different types of substances that just wouldn't be around if you weren't messing with marijuana to begin with.
That's a great point. Now, other than doing it medicinally, what is the purpose, do you feel, of somebody doing marijuana besides medicinally?
Besides medicinally, just to smoke it, I don't think there is any real benefits. I mean, Medicinally, I'm all for it. I'm all for its industrial applications, such as paper, even some hemp oils and gases I've heard them talk about. But as far as just using marijuana to get high, I don't see anything scriptural about it. Um, and we got to remember that our adversary, the devil, walks around and he tries to devour us. And if we're not in our right state of mind, then it's easier for him to grab a hold of us.
Sure. Now, this is something that you just talk about smoking it, or you talk about ingesting it anyway, in terms of vaporizing or eating it just to get a high. You think always are just not scriptural or not good?
I think always, really, because it's unfruitful. It doesn't edify you to walk around being high. Yeshua told us we have to stay sober and vigilant. We have to watch for him to come. And I think that any substance that would cloud the mind could interfere with us doing that. We want to be like the virgins who were ready, they were prepared, not like the ones who needed to go out and rush away to buy the oil.
So you had an experience where you got arrested at a young age with it. Now, besides you getting arrested from a health standpoint, did it affect your health, do you feel, in any way?
Yes, I'd smoked marijuana and I'd also smoked cigarettes for a very long time. And after smoking for years and years, it just took a great toll on my health. I could literally walk for short amount of time and just huff and puff. And whenever I got away from all that, I could feel my lungs getting healthier. I could go out and be more active and participate in sports with my son that I just couldn't get the energy or wind for when I was still smoking marijuana.
And what would you say to people that said that's because you were smoking cigarettes and it wasn't the marijuana smoke that was creating that issue with your lungs?
Well, if you actually look at what marijuana does, that's a myth. If you're smoking marijuana, all the carcinogens and any type of smoke of any kind is bad for you. So I just don't believe that.
Sure. And what do you want to say to people like the felony interview that I interviewed and other people that not only are trying to legalize marijuana for recreational use, but people that are into the scriptures trying to support that? What's your opinion to them based on your experience with it?
My opinion is to seek God. Our Messiah Yeshua told us to have him as an example. I could not picture for 1 second our Messiah getting high at any stage of his ministry, at any point of his life, and it's just not something I feel that we're to do. There's no scriptural evidence to base getting high on.
And now, when you talk about altering the mind, getting high with the substance, what's your opinion about alcohol in the scriptures?
Alcohol, people love to quote Jesus as turning water into wine and things like this, but they also have to realize that Jesus, he may have turned the water into wine. It was new wine. It wasn't alcoholic and strong. It wasn't something that he was going around promoting all the time. It wasn't like he was going around drinking and partying. He was our Messiah. That's far from the truth. And it's not scriptural. And it says many, many times in scripture to be sober, not to give in to strong drink, not to do those things.
Since so many people of the world drink and do smoke marijuana, do you think, as being a believer and being set apart, that's one of the things that could set us apart?
Well, I do believe that if somebody were to drink moderately, maybe it's not going to be something that's as bad as, say, getting drunk every day and laying around and getting high or this or that. I mean, even to have a couple glasses of wine at Passover, I mean, that'd even be good for your health. But the bad benefits of these things are much worse. People that start drinking, they start using marijuana, they get lazy, their job skills lack, their communication and social skills start going downhill. It's just a losing battle, really.
And what made you, Ron, decide to stop smoking? Was there an experience, or did you just decide you had enough of this?
Yes, sir. I'd actually, through starting marijuana, I had gone into other drugs such as cocaine and eventually into heroin. And when I started messing with heroin, I about lost my family, I about lost my son, I about lost everything I had. but I'd always used marijuana with those other substances. And I realized once I could put it all behind me and follow the Messiah like he wants us to be followed, through his strength, I was able to put those things down and start following his word more clearly and more better. And just, it changed my entire life with my family, with my work, with everything in all aspects of my life. I just feel blessed and overjoyed that I could get rid of those things and have a clear mind today.
And what about the possibility of marijuana becoming legalized in most states in the United States? What's your feelings about that?
You know, it really kind of scares me, especially with younger kids who are going to see it being used recreationally and it's being glorified in every type of movie and TV and any type of literature you can think of. I think it's just a shame, really. I wouldn't want my son growing up to think that marijuana is something that's acceptable to society and okay. Because, like I said, anything that clouds your mind and could take you away from the reality that the Creator gave us to enjoy is not something that should be socially acceptable.
Absolutely. And how do you feel about, it's already legalized in some states. You being somebody who was, you would say, addicted to marijuana, you would agree, correct?
Yes,
How
sir.
what would you say to people, very humble people that are struggling with it and using this legalization as an excuse that it's okay to do? I mean, I'm asking you this, Ron, because you're not just somebody who is against it. You have an experience, and you know people aren't doing it on purpose to hurt other people or to create these bad examples. They just don't realize it. So, what would be your message to people that are using the legalization of it as an excuse to believe it's okay what they're doing when they know deep down inside that it's filling some type of void or something?
I believe that those people should really just sit down and consider it, really meditate on it and pray about it, because if you're using the legalization of a substance, no matter what it could be, to justify you doing it, then you've got a problem. You can't, I mean, if cocaine were to be legalized, would that be okay to do it? Of course not. We got to really, we know down in our heart that the things that we do create the circumstances around us. And if we allow these people to legalize marijuana in all these states, all it's going to do is promote our young children and our young people to want to smoke it more often and lead us into very unfruitful practices.
There's a huge amount of people in jail because they've gotten arrested for marijuana possession. And some people say the police use this to fund whatever they have to fund or to make money. And there are studies that show, especially in minority communities, that this is one of the things they use, the marijuana, to control population, let's say. Do you have any feelings about this, or do you know about this since you personally have experience with it?
Absolutely. I live somewhat close to Baltimore, Maryland. And down there, you can just see that the police really will use the war on drugs to try to create a situation for different minorities that they can kind of control. They can put different people in jail for a certain amount of time for this or that. They can use it as a way to search people's vehicles, to try to do different things. I do believe that the war on drugs isn't necessarily the greatest thing that we have right now, because it's spending so many tax dollars to fight people who are just smoking a little bit of marijuana. Well, smoking a little bit of marijuana might not be something that's scriptural. It might not even be good for us. I think the police do take it to the next level. With some of these people that I've seen, the circumstances they grow up in are just ridiculous. And they're victims of their circumstances, really, their environment. And I don't condone anybody using that as an excuse, but to a certain degree, we have to understand that these people are, they have almost little to no way out. And the only way they can is to really search their heart, get in touch with the Bible, and try to find their way out of there through faith.
Sure. Now, you being arrested and I assume thrown in jail for the marijuana possession, would you
Yes, sir.
say, looking back now, that that was actually a blessing in disguise, or would you say that that was an experience that you're not thankful for? Because did it help you realize that something I'm doing is wrong, or did it help you stop doing it? I mean, how do you feel about it now versus how you felt about it then?
Well, Paul, I was first arrested, like I said, when I was 14 years old for marijuana possession. And it escalated quite quickly to where I was arrested multiple times for marijuana possession. In 2008, I was arrested not only for possession of marijuana, but for possession of cocaine when the police had busted in my door. And until you experience that, you've never experienced the terror of not knowing when somebody could just bust in your door, throw you on the ground, and haul you off to jail. It's terrible. I wish that on nobody. It's a horrible experience. But the one thing I did get out of that is when I was in that jail, I went back to my Christian roots. I picked up a Bible and I started actually studying it instead of just reading it and listening to what preachers had told me. I started finding deeper meanings and I found a Messiah that I never knew existed until I studied.
I guess what I'm getting at, Ron, what I'm asking you is if that experience never happened without you getting arrested those several times, and you were free to do the marijuana or any other type of drug as much as you wanted, do you think it would have been much worse for you today, or do you think those experiences helped you to overcome it?
I think those experiences absolutely helped me to overcome it. If marijuana becomes legal, there's going to be no stop for people to see what they're actually doing. If somebody's arrested like I was and they're put in jail, it's a blessing in disguise for most people because it does give them the opportunity to really sit back and think what they want out of life. For me, it was an opportunity to sit back and really meditate and pray about what I wanted. Did I want to keep my family and go forward, or did I want to lose everything that I've built up in the drop of a hat for a substance that did nothing but get you high? It's worthless.
So just to be clear, just so everyone knows, you support medical marijuana being legal,
Absolutely.
and you support the hemp plant for its usable properties being legal, but the marijuana to get high, whether it's smoking, eating, or any way of ingesting it for the purpose of getting high, that's what you are against.
Yes, sir. Absolutely.
And from a scriptural standpoint, you believe that absolutely under no circumstances would the scriptures support getting high under any circumstances besides medicinally, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And is there anything else you want to add, a message to the people that are unaware of the negative effects of marijuana? Maybe they've done it a couple of times and they've experienced a good feeling, but that's it. What message would you like to give those people that are supporting the legalization of marijuana, but they really don't know how bad it can turn?
I'd just like to say, think of our children. Think of all the kids who are out there and they're experimenting and they're trying to see what this marijuana is all about. They're seeing it at every turn, every corner. They're seeing it in movies. They're seeing it on TV. There's no real escape for these guys. And for us to promote it and make it legal, it makes it so much harder for them to overcome because they think it's cool. They think it's the right way to do. These people on TV take it to the next level all the time and just throw it in your faces everywhere you turn. I ask that they just really consider how they want the next generations of America to be brought up. Do we want to grow away from our morals and our standards and our values, or do we really want to take that left turn and go into social anarchy and promote all kinds of substances that we know in our heart are really not right to use?
I personally haven't used marijuana and I don't know the effects on the body, but people tell me that it's not as bad as drinking. For example, they say if you're driving when you're high, it's not as bad as drunken driving. You experiencing this, I do know it slows down reactions. Would you agree that there's no danger in smoking while you're high?
I don't agree with that. Marijuana, it can make you lazy and tired, and it does cloud your judgment. And I say anything that clouds your judgment, you shouldn't operate a vehicle while you're doing it.
And what would be your reply to people from the scriptures that will continue to say that there's no law or sin against using the herb to get high?
Like I say, our job is to walk like the Messiah walked. If you can sit here and tell me that the Messiah would light up a joint, then go for it. But if not, you know in your heart what's right.
What else do you want to add on this important subject?
I'd like to say just really pray about it and ask the Spirit to lead you in the right direction. Don't let this society be a society that ruins the next generations coming up through legalizing substances that we know promote nothing but laziness and they're not edifying anything. We need to take steps in the right direction morally and try to at least get this country back in running working order. We've really taken a left turn and it's time to really show the American spirit and come back into our Christian roots.
Absolutely, Ron. Thank you so much for joining us with this important information that you're sharing and from your own personal experience. And I pray that somebody listening, this message will reach them because it's important. And again, it comes from personal experience, not from just our own thoughts. Ron, before we leave, what is your question or your opinion about somebody saying it's up to me, it's my own body, and no government has the right to tell me what to put in my body? What would you say to that?
I'd say the government don't have to tell you what you could put in your body. You know that you're hurting your own body through smoking marijuana. Anything that hurts your body, clouds your mind, and doesn't serve to edify you is only wrong and misleading. So don't fool yourself. You ain't fooling God. Just don't do it.
Well, now, Ron, when you started smoking at 14, or when you at least got arrested, I don't know how young you started, were you doing it to fill a void, or were you doing it just to be cool, peer pressure? What was the reason that you were doing it, and why do you think people do it?
You know, I started smoking marijuana when I was 14, and I think it was really to fit in with the crowd. And then my mom had got sick, and it did help me fill a void there for a while. And then through marijuana, I got friends that had LSD or cocaine, and it was all part of that culture, all part of that scene. And once you start trying marijuana and you feel like it's something that makes you feel good or it didn't make you hurt so bad, it cured your depression, and it's basically a big way to not deal with your problems. But every time that high wears off, you gotta face those problems anyway. The best way to face your problems is on your knees with God. When I was 16 years old, I was arrested again multiple times for not only using marijuana, but now I was stealing things to try to support my habit. Whenever you start into that life, it just progressively gets worse, in my opinion, until eventually you're like me and you start doing cocaine. And whenever that stops filling the void, next thing you know, you're back to heroin. And you don't want to go that route. I can tell you from personal experience, drugs are not worth it. Marijuana is not worth it. It will not fill a void in your life. Getting high is not worth it just for fun. Look at what you're putting your body through just for a little 2 hour high. You're putting not only yourself at risk, you're putting others at risk if you're driving cars around. You're putting your parents and your loved ones through unwanted stress and misery because they care about you and they want to see you clean and sober and back to the person they know you can be. Just, you really got to think about what you're doing, not only to yourself, but to everybody else around you as well, and to what the kids are going to think whenever they look at you. Because, like I said, I can't stress enough that the next generation's coming up. It's being forced on them left and right, and we need to really take a step back and see how we want our kids to be raised and what kind of influence that they're being shown because it's terrible. It's a terrible way to live.
Ron, with other drugs, you hear like crack and cocaine and heroin and things that there's a really big letdown that doesn't happen with marijuana. What would you say about that? Is that true that it's a lot worse, or is there none with marijuana? What's the truth?
I feel like the truth of that is most of the time, if you see somebody who's using cocaine or they're using heroin, they're using marijuana as well. Those people use marijuana all day long, like I did. I never put my marijuana pipe down. I'd steady smoke pot all day long. But then when I got into heroin, I'd take my shot, and it really is a letdown as far as your life, nothing more. Because that's what you're really losing out of the whole package. You're losing life. You're losing precious time spent with your kids, precious time spent with with your wife and your loved ones, and it's just not worth it.
And it's special, even though when you say this special time, you're not only talking about being physically there, you're talking about being mentally there with your kids and your family, and this is what you're losing if you're in another place, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely, because whenever you're laying around and you're all high, half passed out on the couch, and your son comes up to you and tugs on you, Daddy, Daddy, what do you want to do today? And all you want to do is go up into the room and get high. That's no way to live. That's no way for you to live or your son to live. You got to think about what you're doing. It's not all about you all the time. It's not all about getting high. It's about what your life could be, not about what it is at that moment when you're high. There's ways to deal with these things, and there's ways to get out of them. And I just pray to God that people find a way out like I did.
And what would now you're talking about somebody or giving your experience of somebody who got high all the time. What would your advice, or would it be the same to somebody that does it very seldom, maybe a couple of days a week and maybe once a day or something? It's not all the time. Would you think that's any different, or would you think that's just leading up to it getting worse and worse?
I really do believe it's leading up to getting worse and worse. I mean, I know everybody's different, every case is different, and there are people who get high once in a while and are only on the weekends or these type of things, but if you're a believer in the Lord, then you shouldn't be doing it at all. That's just bottom line. Christ Yeshua would no way possible be getting high, and he would not teach anybody to be getting high. He said to stay sober, be vigilant. He doesn't want us getting high.
How would you tell people, Ron, in the love of Yeshua, with telling them the truth and what you're saying, but doing it in a way where you're not rubbing them off the wrong way or scaring them away? Uh, how would you treat this, or how would you say I mean, other than everything you're saying here in this video, but you and I know if you heard this when you weren't a believer, you would have just shrugged a shoulder and kept doing it. So, has our Creator revealed to you a way to approach fellow believers and to help them to see this without just coming straight out and telling them?
Well, I believe you have to approach every situation with love. I've lost so many friends under these circumstances that it really hurts my heart. And every time I'd approach one of them, they just didn't want to hear it. All they wanted to do was get high. And then I had the ones that they were believers, but their faith wasn't strong enough to pull them out of it. And those are the people that I still go and I still minister to them and I try to help them. And some of the time, it really does work. You approach them with love. You never put somebody down for what they're doing. You never try to create an issue of space between you guys. You want to embrace them. You want to try to lead them out of these things with love, out of support, and offer them your strength. If there's anything you can do to help a fellow brother or sister that's struggling with marijuana addiction, struggling with any type of addiction, you need to really be there for them and show them that if there's a void in their life that they think needs filled, you can help fill that void through friendship, through fellowship, through many different ways. You could go see what they like to do, enjoy sports, things of this nature, instead of just talking about drugs or wanting to do drugs. Or I hear it all the time with so many people that a lot of them even claim to be believers, but most of the time I hear when it comes to the marijuana subject, Genesis 1:11 says God made herbs and they were good. Yeah, I understand that. Well, God made poison ivy too, but you ain't putting it in a pipe and smoking it. So you really got to use common sense and comprehension with everything. Every case is different, but they all have to be approached with love and support.
Very well, Ron. Thank you so much for your time, brother, and I look forward to doing it again. And I want everyone to get to Ron's page and just give him a word of encouragement and support him in his message to get this out, because it's an important message, like he said, for the children, for the nation, and so people really need to know what's going on. It's not about the government making something legal or illegal. It's about Satan having his way or not. And
Absolutely.
brother, thank you so much for sharing, and I think we're going to be doing talking some more in the near future. Okay.
Thank you, Paul. I love your ministry. I think you're doing a fabulous job, buddy.
All right, everybody, that was it. Those were two of the interviews that I wanted to bring out on this topic. And as I said at the beginning, I know not all of you are going to be in agreement with me, and I didn't make this video to upset anyone. I have the best intentions to lift everyone up. And again, if you're one of my personal friends that thinks or disagrees with me and thinks marijuana is fine, you're still my friend, okay? I just I pray for you. I pray you see things, and I pray you're safe. And it's better to be safe than to be sorry. And I don't want to take any chances with letting the enemy get a foothold on me. So I'm going to do my best to be extreme for my Creator. And I pray that you will also, and the shalom and peace of our Creator can be upon us all.